Do you want to stay more focused on the right goals in your life, or even just figure out what the right goals are for you? Do you want clarity? Do you want better work-life balance? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Success Through Failure.
Welcome to the Success Through Failure podcast, the show that reveals failure as your path to success. You'll listen to intriguing interviews with some of the most successful people on the planet and learn how their failures became a launchpad for success and how yours can too. Here's your host, former Division I All-American wrestler, former Division I head coach, speaker, and personal coach, Jim Harshaw.
Welcome to another episode of Success Through Failure. Today I bring you CONNIFF ALLENDE. Ever since I finished my career as a Division I All-American athlete, I longed for not only the clarity of purpose that I had as an athlete, but also the accountability that comes with aspiring for big goals with a team of like-minded people. Then I discovered mastermind groups. Masterminds are small groups of like-minded people who get together either in person or over Skype or just over the phone to provide support, feedback, and advice to other members of the group. So I dove in and I learned all I could about mastermind groups, and then I finally launched my own. And the change was instant. I regained the accountability of being part of a group of like-minded, hardworking individuals who hold me to a higher standard. My mastermind group helps me get feedback and advice and even validation when I'm making big decisions in my life. And I have clarity and focus and accountability again, just like when I was an athlete. I've now facilitated dozens of high performers in mastermind groups. I'm talking Olympians and MBAs and neurosurgeons and professional athletes and entrepreneurs and lots of others. I've taken everything you need to know to start your own mastermind group, and I've put it into a short 10-page ebook titled The Quick and Easy Guide to Starting Your Own Mastermind Group in 30 Days or Less. Grab a copy of this free ebook by going to jimharshawjr.com/mastermind. That's jimharshawjr.com/mastermind. Sam is a multi-award-winning social entrepreneur and co-founder and former CEO of Livity, Don't Panic, and Live Magazine. Since starting his entrepreneurial career at age 19, Sam has mentored thousands of talented young entrepreneurs and hustlers around the world. Sam is an acclaimed public speaker and advocate of business as unusual and a purpose-driven strategy consultant to brands such as Red Bull, Unilever, and PlayStation. Sam has refined the concepts explored in his best-selling book, Be More Pirate, by delivering workshops to senior executives in the headquarters of Google, Facebook, and also to hundreds of socially conscious entrepreneurs and innovators in South Africa, the United States, Greece, and the UK. For the listener, as always, if you don't have time to listen to this entire episode, or if you hear something you like but you don't have a chance to write it down, make sure you grab your free copy of the action plan. Just go to jimharshawjr.com/action. Sam, welcome to the show.
Jim, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, well, let's dive right in. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Kind of, maybe where you grew up and sort of the brief overview of how you got from there to where you're at now.
Well, I should do it being a fan of the show and having heard some of the recent episodes. I will do it through the lens of failure.
Excellent.
I started failing as a teenager. My first big failure was the band I started. It had the worst named band ever. We were called Fizzy Milk.
That's great.
And my first failure, well, after the name, was the discovery that I couldn't sing. So the band kicked me out, and they were my friends. So feeling sorry for me, they made me be the manager. And I asked, what does the manager do? And they said, you get us some gigs. And so my very first entrepreneurial act was to put a band on in a scout hut in a tiny little town in South London. I convinced my older sister's boyfriend to buy a load of beer, which we sold out the back of his car. And I walked away with, the popularity of all the guys and girls and these teenagers that had come to this sweaty little event. And I walked away with about £200. And that really changed my life. And my teenage years were spent failing at putting on events until kind of hit my late teens. I'd trained as a chef. I fell out of college. got into a really great top-notch Marco Pierre White restaurant, realized I hated the pace and the kind of the misogyny and extreme competitiveness of the kitchen environment, and so started doing nightclubs full time. I got into a lot of trouble, went on tour with bands, I got myself tons of death threats, nearly got a band killed.
Wow.
I got kicked out of my own nightclub by my own security. All sorts.
Those sound like separate episodes altogether.
Yeah. There were some good failings, and that started my first real business, Don't Panic, which formed out of my bedroom. It was kind of club promotions, events, flyers, design, and it turned into something extraordinary, really. From my bedroom to a warehouse we took over. We were doing an awful lot of print for a lot of events and nightclubs, and a lot of cash was passing through our hands, and I didn't have a lot of business acumen, and I found myself in a massive amount of debt on my 21st birthday, about £250,000
Wow.
at the time, to some pretty big printers who came down with some pretty scary threats. And as is the message of your show, and as I've heard again and again on various episodes, that acute moment, 21, extraordinary debt, so much fun that we'd had, and an acuteness to get out of this situation, to not let anybody down. And really that was the moment at which I taught myself business. I then, with some really good friends, we built that into a real business. We started to understand what the profit margins were, how the business could grow. We paid everything back. We built the business up, and it's an absolute thriving business now. I'm no longer involved in the day-to-day, but I think it was the third most awarded agency at Cannes, at the International Festival of Ideas last year. So it's doing, that's now, it's nearly 20 years old, although my friend who runs it likes to reposition it as a startup every few years, likes to give it a kind of new lick of paint.
Yeah.
And then my kind of failing there was, realizing that I'd taken this thing that I loved and the passion of it, and I kind of, for me, I'd sold it a little bit by having to get it to the size and profitability to get it out of trouble. I'd taken away some of the aspects that I loved, this kind of change the world mentality. Let's really make a difference. As I'd not corporatized it, it's still a very rebellious business, but it taught me something. You got to really watch out for the soul of the things that you start as they begin to scale. And so I used all of that inspiration and created my most successful business to date, called Livity, which is a social enterprise that stands for young people. We give young people platforms and opportunities to transform their lives. It's called a transformation engine, actually, most oftentimes by the young people who use our services. But to our clients, which is the business model, we are a marketing agency. So to the likes of Netflix and PlayStation, we run their global youth communications, creating content and campaigns. And the reason they're so effective, the reason we win Agency of the Year and Campaign of the Year again and again, is because, if you look around the big old warehouse that we're in the middle of Brixton in South London, it looks like any other agency that anybody would recognize, more Macs than the Mac store and exposed brick walls and stuff. But the cool thing about Livity is that there's hundreds of young people here every single day, young entrepreneurs, young hustlers, young students, people looking for a safe place, looking for a place to work, whether it's their homework or start the business that's going to change their lives. And that melting pot of experience, our clients' experience for the world and our young people's kind of naivety and their experience and ambition and questioning ability, is where we make both world-changing campaigns and create life-changing experiences for these young people.
It's always nice because a lot of times before I do these interviews, if this is for the listener, we do a quick video. We just record the audio, but we do a video sort of Skype in advance and just get to know the person. And so Sam, you showed me, just kind of gave me a small glimpse inside of your office. It looks like a cool place and buzzing in the background with people and a lot of things going on. So it sounds like you've created something pretty awesome, and everybody seems to have a business idea. You've mentored a lot of young entrepreneurs.
Yep.
Why do you think everybody wants to have a business? Why do you think everybody has that entrepreneurial streak in them, or at least that glimmer of hope in their eye that maybe one day they'll start that business?
I think it's pretty profound. I think the real reasons for it. In the UK, I think intention to start a business is around about 30%, and I think in the US it's slightly higher. And then it drops down to about 5% of people who actually do. And this is changing. This number's really dramatically changing. Last year in both our countries was the highest ever number of directors recorded with legal companies behind them under the age of 30. But then if you go to a prison, the propensity to start a business rockets up to 60, 70%.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's something to be drawn from these kind of trends. And if you go into the informal economy, if you go to the highest rates of recorded or unrecorded entrepreneurship, if you look into markets, we've got offices in South Africa, in Johannesburg, and we did in Lagos, in Nigeria, and Kenya. You start stepping outside of the formal ideas of what we understand to be entrepreneurship, and you'll see it rise again. And the area that I'm most interested in at the moment would never ever call themselves entrepreneurs. It's kind of a pre-enterprise stage, or more commonly, I think the term would be used, the side hustle, a kind of mindset where it's ordinary and not. In fact, there's a guy came into our office the other day, a young guy with a T-shirt that says, "Even my side hustle has a side hustle." And this idea that you can be part student, part-time job, you're part of a friend's initiative, they're starting up, someone else is building an app, you're making a thing. This is where I think it dawns. Long before we come up with the trappings of the terminology and the narrative around it, it's a desire. It's a desire to make a difference. It's a desire to articulate yourself into the world. It's an ideal of self-determination. And I think that's part of the reason we're seeing such an explosion in it, because 10 years ago, or even less maybe, certainly longer when I was starting out, you needed a business plan, you needed a bank manager, you needed all this externality, which really took the idea, like you say, everybody has the idea, took it away, it makes it more difficult, you have to put it down, it loses momentum. Now, the notion that you can take this idea and make it something is, basically, it's only you and the device in your pocket is all you need. So it's both more straightforward, which means we see the explosion in a desire to articulate who you are, and it's also, I think, partly explains the rise of values-driven organizations, because the less you've diluted that process by having to create a narrative around it, the more an honest reflection of you and your own values it is.
What do you feel are some of the biggest mistakes? Because there's so many of them fail, right? Speaking of failure, and my name of my podcast, so many businesses fail. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see young or new entrepreneurs make?
So I think there's a really fine line here, and anyone out there who's involved in mentoring will be super aware of this. How do you harness the ambition of a young entrepreneur, yet try not to let them run before they can walk?
Yeah.
So oftentimes I will, have a 17-year-old who's got a fantastic idea, but you can see they haven't yet got the kind of scars. You don't really know what you're made of until you've had the stuffing knocked out of you. And I will encourage them to try to find an entrepreneur or a business that's a few years ahead of them, and go and get a job within a small organization, so they'll really learn the ropes, but they can kind of make some mistakes on someone else's money. They can have their failure in a safer environment, so that they don't suffer the knockbacks that might take them off this road altogether for the rest of their life. And yet you try and convey that wisdom and rarely does anyone want to take it, because the real entrepreneur in them is like, what do you mean I should go and get a job?
Right.
So I think it's a very, very fine line, and we have that here with the young guys I work with. How do you make sure you're not setting someone up for failure by allowing them to stretch too far, whilst at the same time really back the ambitious, whatever it is, that gene that separates entrepreneurs from anyone else, that desire and that willingness to go the extra mile to do it. I think that's one of the hardest parts.
And you seem to have a little bit of a unique mindset, I sense, on entrepreneurialism. Like you're an advocate of, quote, business as unusual. What is that? What do you mean by that?
I struggle with the narrative that I think we've allowed business to be owned by. I respect and admire what you're doing, because you've linked success to failure, but I think that's a very rare conversation. The typical measures of success of business are one-dimensional, and they don't do justice to the opportunity of business in most of our lives. How do we measure success? Numbers, usually. How many people do you work? How many people are in your company? What's your turnover? These numbers have got nothing to do with success. You can have 100 people in your firm today, or 1 million tomorrow, and actually, you might be desperately out of profit. Your turnover has got nothing to do with your viability or your innovation.
Yeah.
The success of business, to my earlier point, what's the reason for it? It's internal. It's something about who we are. So the new measures of success of business should be our ability to collaborate, our ability to communicate, our ability to convey ideas or bring others with us. That's what the real vehicle is. And somehow along the way, we've allowed the kind of trappings of the administrators, of the legal profession and the accountancy profession, all the kind of trappings that go around it, to take the narrative of business and turn it into something that's less multidimensional than it deserves to be. And we forget that all of these things are just organizations, extensions of humanity. And that's really what makes them brilliant and amazing. So I push very hard when business success, language and terminology becomes black and white. That's very far away from what the true opportunity is.
So Sam, what do you say when someone says, yeah, but you still have to pay the bills, right? You have to keep the lights on. You've got to make money, especially if you have a young family to feed and that sort of thing. How do you balance the two?
If you're starting a business just to pay the bills, then you're probably going to get a job. The ambition has to be several times higher. Of course, paying the bills should be rudimentary. Your earlier question, what's the main cause of failure? The main cause of failure, fundamentally, in nearly 90% of startups, is cash flow. But let's not make the entire conversation about business cash flow. So let's take that as a hygiene factor. Let's take the fact that you will be a good leader. Let's take the fact that you'll look after your team. Let's take the fact that you'll operate with integrity and you will manage your cash flow with rigor and effectiveness as the basic hygiene factors. That's building your house on the stones. So then let's get back up into the kind of space that we should be aspiring to. So where does this thing go? What's its greatest opportunity for change? What's your greatest opportunity for expansion and transformation? What is your dream that this place can go to? And I think that's the challenge of the entrepreneur, because the gravitational pull of the administration side of it is so strong, and therefore the ability to justify, well, we had to do this because I had to keep lights on. Great. But I think a reality check that a percentage of business is about the administration, but a large percentage of an entrepreneur's role is very much about the vision and the opportunity and where can this thing really go and who can I take on this journey.
It's an interesting perspective because you see so many successful businesses that are also enjoyable places to work. They're highly sought after places to work. And they're usually the type of companies that focus on, taking care of people. They're collaborative, they're open environments. And it seems to me that the idea of focus on the process, not the outcome, fits here, right? If you focus on the process, if you focus on being collaborative, if you focus on making change and making the change you want to see in the world and in collaboration and taking care of people and all these things, it seems like if you take care of those, you're going to increase your chances of success.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. If the focus isn't do great work, then chances are the pressure of the day-to-day has ground you down and you're setting your sights low. If the focus is getting to the end of the day or getting to the end of the week or getting to the end of the month, then chances are there's a very strong reality check. Is this business viable? Do you have the strength and is the moment in time, and do you have the resources? Those are the questions that you perhaps need to ask yourself. I think, like a bad relationship, the greatest tragedy of life is a life half lived, and is the relationship with your business allowing you to do that if it's just a grind. But then lifting it back up, I think, is where this all gets really interesting. I'm a hopeless, romantic, optimistic, naive, entrepreneur in this space. And I know this narrative isn't the norm. The first time I was 3 years into the growth of Livity. So by that point, 8 years into my entrepreneurial journey, I got my first ever business advisor. Throughout this time, I'd read a lot of books and I'd been working out myself. And the business advisor came in, they sat me down. The business by then was a couple of £1 million, and maybe we were 40 staff. And their question was, well, what's your exit strategy? Now, very common question to any entrepreneur.
Sure.
I'm sure everyone listening out there, if they don't know their exit strategy, they certainly know what it means. I sat there, looked at them, and then took them to the fire escape. I thought that's what they meant. I thought they meant the exit strategy was, well,
here's how we get out.
What's the plan to get out of here? And
They seem rather paranoid, right?
Yeah, exactly. Really? That's the opening question. And so, with some fondness, they explained to me why most people start businesses. Or perhaps not why most people start businesses, but the gravitational pull that draws a lot of businesses in that way. And I was fascinated. Oh, really? How interesting. Yeah, I can see that maybe to cash out with a life-changing sum of money is a motivating goal. I took myself and I did a mini MBA for entrepreneurs and studied much more of this stuff. And I had a singular question to every single entrepreneur I know who'd cashed out and exited. But eventually I'd asked hundreds hundreds this very same question. Were you happy after exiting? And I'd only found one who said yes.
Wow.
One. Everybody else said, a bit frustrated, really missed it, and then did it again. Because we're all here because we love the thrill of building. We're people who are supposed to make things. And again, that's what I mean. It's a mistake to think the trappings of the narrative of just what's the basics, the admin, the baseline. The baseline is that you run a healthy business and look after the people and there's a degree of profit. It's after that where it gets really interesting. And we get confused that the basics are actually the end goal. Exit this thing, and that won't satisfy who you are, the appetite and ambition that you've got that's enabled you to make something that very few other people can actually create in the world. Use that for what it's truly for.
Yeah. You wrote the book, best-selling book, Be More Pirate. So what do we learn? What can we learn from the quote, in your words, radical strategies of golden age pirates?
So I find myself in an interesting position, as many of us as will. Regardless of political persuasions, I think it's possible in both of our countries to look to our current levels of leadership on all sides of the spectrum and sigh. There's a bit of a vacuum of real new ideas and thinking that perhaps is equal to the level of both challenge and opportunity that the middle of the 21st century offers us. I find it rare to really find the highest levels of leadership in business to the organizations that I consult. More often, there's a sense of fear and a foreboding and a conversation about disruption and transformation that rarely really ladders up to the kind of seizing the opportunity or even avoiding the crises we face. But rather than be depressed, I spend more of my time increasingly with these incredible young entrepreneurs. And you mentioned some of them, from Baltimore to Detroit to Athens and the turning around of the economic situation there to the outer skirts of the tough areas of London. And in those entrepreneurs, I find nothing but inspiration and innovation and real ambition, a real sense of belief that not only have the institutions that are supposed to be there to support them let them down, but that they're not needed anyway, and they have the tools that they require to create the change that they want to see in the world. And this really fills me with some positive energy. And I was trying to, as I was leaving Livity, I'd always said that Livity is an organization that predominantly works with young people, that I would step aside when I hit 40. 40 would be too old. And it was easy for me to say that when I was 24, because that's when I set it up. And at 24, as you know, 40 seems like it's never going to happen.
Of course.
And then lo and behold, it does. And everybody had heard me say this enough times. So it was time to go. And the book was my transition project. How would I ease out of the business and give the new leadership team enough time and space of their own? And I'm sure everyone who listens to the show is familiar with that old Eleanor Roosevelt line: if you want to know the next thing you should do, you should take a look at what scares you most. And for me, writing has been that. I love the idea.
I've never heard that. I love that, though.
It's great, isn't it? I mean, and I'm dyslexic. I have a chip on my shoulder. I didn't make it to university. And also with all the businesses I've run, it's been a big team effort. So I was very, really wanted to, could I do something on my own? Could I do something? Could I create something? Could I write something? So I spent a year and put all my angry thoughts about the opportunity of a new generation that I think we're overlooking, about the leadership that I think we're missing, but really is within us all. And I was hanging out for a metaphor. I pitched it as a business book. I pitched it as a book called Purpose First, and it was about this new dawn of business and really putting our priorities into shape, and leading organizations just to hit the financial bottom line is missing the next stage of business evolution. And Jim, I've got to tell you, it was the most boring book on earth. I got quite far in. I got a book deal, but by golly, I was boring myself. And I was running some of the material through these workshops that I run with young entrepreneurs, and even they were like yawning at me. And one guy said to me, he said, "Dan, where's all the usual stuff? Where's all you're waving your hands in the air, telling us about astronauts and pirates?" And I went back to my desk and wrote this note: "Where are the pirates?" And I started doing a bit of research. I went down to the Greenwich Maritime Museum just outside London and started looking, but of course, I'm not talking about Somali pirates. I'm not talking about Chinese pirates. I'm not talking about internet pirates. I'm talking about the golden age of pirates. And I discovered something. I discovered part of history that's been lost to us all. The golden age of pirates were the millennials of the 18th century. Average age 28. They looked out on their future. They felt that they'd been sold short. The institutions and establishment at the time were particularly self-interested and didn't have a plan for the disruption that was coming, and they faced mass redundancy. So rather than make the greatest mistake that this generation can make, which is to believe that the way things are is the way things have to be, they rewrote the rules of the society in which they existed. And to do that, to begin with, you got to break some rules. They stepped outside the normal social contract. On board their ships, they created a new society. They established new principles that turned around that which they'd existed in. So suddenly there was democracy. Everybody had equal say on these ships. Every single pirate on board had a vote in the matters at hand. So they were more representative than even Athenian democracy. They had an understanding of diversity that we still struggle with now. They were regularly releasing slaves and inviting people of color to be part of the team, not just part of the team, but part of the team with equal say and equal pay. They had female leaders at a time in the world where women weren't even regarded of equal capacity, but of equal intelligence. They invited a system of fair pay that had some of the recommendations that were made around the great financial collapse of 2009 that we still haven't managed to put in check, where checks and balances meant that nobody was being disproportionately over or underpaid. They invented a system of workplace compensation. So, Jim, if you were on board the pirate ship and you lost a leg, you'd get 800 pieces of 8, or an arm would be 600 pieces of 8. The first time this had ever been seen. And of course, 140 years later, it became a law, and then it became an inalienable human right. Their system of holacracy, of self-organizing teams. They were using agile network systems 300 years before those things were the buzzwords they are today. And the only way they could take on the might of the Spanish Armada or the Royal British Navy was not just their network systems, but also their incredibly sophisticated branding. The skull and crossbones is a meme designed to go viral to deliver the single message that all good marketing should, because there was no way they could take them on equal fighting terms, and they were not the violent rogues that we understand them to be. That was part of the marketing communication, and some economists and historians will strongly argue they were some of the more peaceful people that were on the sea at the time. And I could go on. This innovation of these organizations is part of the story that's been lost, and I think it has a particular prescience and relevance today.
That's absolutely fascinating. I had no idea, and probably most of the listeners didn't either, about anything that you just said there. So it's an interesting take and an interesting sort of revelation and discovery, which was, history right in front of us.
Jim and dear listeners, I was the most surprised person. And as I was writing the book, as an entrepreneur, as someone looking for my next startup, I can't tell you how inspiring these individuals are as role models. And really, but if there's any hesitation, we think we know pirates, we think it's Jack Sparrow or Captain Hook. Of course we do, right? We could have just got to park that, because we all know they've got this funny place in our lives,
Sure.
We've both got children the same age. Our youngest, I'm sure, we both have been to pirate fancy dress parties.
Of course.
Yeah, but tell me any other quasi-socialist murderous rogues from history that you'd let your children go to a fancy dress themed party. Would you let your kid, have you ever been invited to a Pablo Escobar themed children's party? It doesn't happen, right?
Right.
The pirates have this unique place, but we don't know the half of it. And at this moment in time when we're all feeling this sense of frustration, is this the best that we're going to get? And with all this power that we as the entrepreneurs have, a growing power as our community of entrepreneurs grows, I encourage you to look to these role models who truly should sit somewhere between the civil rights and the suffragettes on the spectrum of role models and change agents. And at the time, they were viewed as working class heroes, social innovators, and really probably the unicorns of their day.
Yeah,
the morality was viewed very differently. And if we had time, we could get into that one. But
Well, let me ask you this, Sam. How do we take this and turn this into action for the listener who is saying that's fascinating, and of course we direct them to buy the book, and for the listener, I'll have that link in the action plan. Again, jimharshawjr.com/action, and you'll get all the links there. But what would be an action item, like something that the listener could do in the next 24 to 48 hours to take this mindset and apply it to their lives, and especially for the person who's thinking, I've got this business idea, I've got this thing that I want to do, or maybe they're in business for themselves now, and they want to make this real and take this and make this concrete. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, well, I got really excited when I was taking apart the concept of the mutiny, because I think we're all familiar with the current modus operandi, permission-based change. Those of you guys listening who are within large organizations or perhaps part of your enterprises, connected to large organizations, the freedom of being an entrepreneur is both remarkable and relatively rare. Usually change or permission-based change, which I think that is what most of us experience, we know how it works, right? The best ideas on earth are then asked to be put into PowerPoint slides and then sent to the death of 1,000 thoughts on email threads where good ideas go to die. And the few and far between are the organizations that we know, even our most innovative startups, that are actually keeping pace with the level of change going on outside the walls of our organizations. So I'm advocating a pirate-inspired new form called professional rule breaking. I think is the next 21st century skill. Professional rule breaking pushes you to the edges. I mean, if you're within an organization, it might even get you getting nearly fired once a year is probably the right benchmark of success. But it's taking the idea that you want, and rather than submitting it, it's taking the approach that asking forgiveness is probably better than asking for permission, and putting it into play. Now, in professional rule breaking or a mutiny, there's no OKR, there's no KPI. The new measure of success is others beginning to follow your idea. So I've studied this, and this workshop has really taken off. I've been booked by Heineken, Lego, Mercedes, into some really large organizations where they're struggling to move at pace, as well as running it with entrepreneurs. And what we're seeing with this notion is actually suddenly you've got a methodology that enables not just fast-paced change, but actually new rules to be written. And the more I've studied it, you realize most of the rules that we follow, rules in inverted commas, not the regulations or laws that are really there to protect us, but the rules, really they're habits or behaviors or parts of the status quo that have just formed over time through precedent, perspective, and power. And so equally, a small group of people who start doing budgeting in a new way, start running meetings in new ways, start organizing in a new way, just push that idea out and something begins. And it's much like the agile development techniques used in technology. But I've seen it happen again and again now. A small team go, right, we're not going to run these sessions like this anymore. We're not going to hold ourselves to the punctuality of this organization anymore. Here's our new principle. We're going to begin doing this tomorrow. And then over time, it becomes the new social norm. And very, very rapidly, you can change culture, slow-moving cultural parts of any organization overnight. So it's a modern mutiny. It's a form of professional rule breaking. It's inspired by the golden age of pirates, and I encourage it as a daily practice, much like we might go for a run, get our 7 hours of sleep, or even our 5 veggies a day. Break a rule every single day. And so the rule-breaking muscle will be strong as you need it when the time comes for the rule that you most need to break when doing the right thing than doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, man. Love it, Sam. For the listener, I would recommend going back and listening to that last couple of minutes there again, because that was just powerful stuff and truth, and probably a little contrary to what you're normally used. Well, definitely contrary to what we're used to thinking, and which is kind of the norm and the mediocrity around us. This is a new way of thinking, and a way of thinking that helps you rise above the mediocrity and do things differently. So, and is by definition the opposite of status quo. So thank you for that, Sam.
My pleasure.
Can you tell us about a time where you failed? Because, it's one thing to say everything that you're saying here, but you've actually found success through this mindset. But were there failures along the way? Were there struggles? And you told us, you actually alluded to this a little bit earlier in the episode here. But can you take us to that time when you failed, you felt that overwhelming self-doubt, that hopelessness that often comes from failure, and how you were able to move through that?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm sure everyone listening, if we're honest, the majority of all of this is failures. I don't know. I thought about this with your title. What success doesn't come through failure? Have you heard yet somebody tell you a story of success that had no failure attached?
Yeah.
Success, I think, is a mess. If you're right in the middle of some messy stuff, chances are you're doing the right thing. And how you get through it and finding the strand that's going to lead you there is the thing. But sometimes there's just the out-and-out failure. My heart on my sleeve, I have 3 times had to make significant redundancies and cuts into the business. And I suppose that's not necessarily the failure itself. That's an act to protect the longevity of the business. But in that moment, I can't think of anything worse that's happened to me in business. Now, it's the end result of a multitude of failings and an inability to read the markets and what was going on outside fast enough. But having to make people who fought side by side with you, in some instances, people I've been with for years, close friends really over that time, and to have to let them go, and try and help them find another job whilst you're rapidly trying to clear the business that you're in up and move people out. and do that with dignity and do that with respect and hold on to your own self, not lose yourself in the feeling of failure overwhelming you, so you can pick up the phone the same day that you're letting people out of the office and then still try and sell the business that you're in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't wish that on anyone. And those 3 times that I've had to do it over the 20 years of being in business, that's the lowest.
And for the listener, I want you to recognize that, it's one thing for Sam to share this in the last, 30 seconds or a minute about these were real experiences. And I know you, the listener, are experiencing real struggle, real adversity, real setback, real failure in your life. Maybe right now, maybe it's in your past, or certainly there's some coming in the future. You can pretty much guarantee that if you're moving forward, that is in your life. And so I want you to recognize in that moment that this is normal. Like, this is part of the plan. This is part of the process. And you've heard this over and over and over from successful people on this podcast, whether they're speakers or authors or writers or astronauts, professional athletes or entrepreneurs, you name it, they've experienced it. And it's real and it's normal. You've got to just put your one foot in front of the other and keep taking action. So, Sam, thank you.
And I think I echo that to anybody listening and feeling the pressure of it all. The truth is, this is the norm. Feeling stressed and it being a moment of failure is the majority of this experience. Because when you do get to the success that you've been dreaming of, you'll discover that the moment when you get what you used to want, it's not what you want anymore. Failure is present. Success is always just a little bit out of the distance. And if you're not really in some way out of your depth, then probably you're not pushing yourself. And when you do get to the place that feels like it's success, it's not going to feel like it anymore. And that's the danger. That's the risk in all of this. It puts humans into the position that we're not supposed to be in, because it's a constant place of stress. And so those chemicals firing through your body that are just supposed to be there in moments of risk are there semi-permanently. And it's why I'm so welcome the conversation about resilience and about mental health and about really keeping an eye on that is so present. Entrepreneurs up there with those in a conflict situation, high performance athletes. There are very few conditions, or maybe someone that's working in the emergency room, who have this daily sense, and that really is it. And conversely, that is the indicator of success. If you're going through hard times again and again, then that does mean you're putting yourself out there. That does mean that you're taking risks. That does mean that you're experiencing the mess of success. So it's a very, very tough choice to make, and go into that with an awareness of it and make sure there is recovery space in there as well. Yeah, excellent. Sam, thank you so much for making time to come on the show. Where can listeners find your book and follow you on social media, et cetera? I am Sam Conniff, SAMCONNIFF. I'm pretty easy to find in most of those places. And my full name, Sam Conniff Allende, I'm really the only one of them. So LinkedIn or Twitter, come and get me, and I'm on those things, so I will reply and say hi. Excellent. And for the listener, we'll have links, all of those links right there in the action plan, jimharshawjr.com/action. Sam, thank you so much for making time to come on the show. Appreciate the insights. Jim, it's been a real pleasure. I absolutely stand for what you represent. Success and failure is the link that too few people talk about. So if I can ever help in the future, or to anybody else listening, if any of these things are interesting, do reach out. Excellent. And for the listener, until next time, take the time to get clear on your goals and embrace failure as a stepping stone on your path to success.